And welcome to the Fundamentals of SQL course. In the SQL Statement Foundation section, we are learning about the null statement. So our goal of the is null statement is to identify values that have no value. So null doesn't mean zero. It just, instead of having nothing in your database, it has null. So it just means no value. It doesn't mean zero. And we can't compare a column to null using an equal to operator because it just doesn't work. So instead of that, we use where a value, and then we type out is null, or where a value is not null. So here's the general syntax for is null, where we want to identify values that have no value. So we could select our column names from our table name, and then we would identify in our where statement what column we're looking for, and we would identify is null. And we would do the exact same thing if we want to identify where it is not null, and we would just input not in between is and null. So let's say we want to send out a promotional email to all of our customers, and we need to identify those customers that don't have an email so we can figure out the best way to contact them. So let's use the customer data to complete this example. So let's select the public database and go to DVD customer so we can identify our columns. Remember, in Snowflake, we don't have to write out those select all from DVD customer limit 10 just to get a feel for our columns. We have it right here in our database. So we want to identify the first name, the last name, and their email. So if they don't have an email, we can figure out the best way to contact them. So let's think about our shopping list. We have our first name, last name, and their email. And we're using the DVD customer table. And we need to filter it to identify customers who don't have an email. So let's say where our email column is null. So this doesn't mean that customers don't have an email per se to their name. It just means we don't have the information for it. It has no value in our database. So let's run this. We get 0 rows. That's wonderful. That means every single person in our database has an email filled in with their information. So just a little caveat about the DVD rental database. Since this is a practice database, we have every value that is filled. So there are no nulls. I just want to expose you to the syntax and the use case because when you get into the real world, data is going to be dirty. It's going to be filled with nulls, and that's okay. You just need to be able to identify where to find it and how to use it. So let's say we want to identify the film titles that don't have a rating. So we can go back through and audit and give a rating to those films. So we're going to be using the film table. So let's select that. We're going to be using title and rating. That's going to be our shopping list. So select title, rating from our DVD film. And we're going to use that where statement to filter out where our rating is null. And just like I said before, the data is too clean. So every column is filled, every row is filled. But if this were real data, we would be able to see where the ratings are null, and we would be able to see and go identify those films and be able to give them a rating in our database. So remember that the goal of a null or using is null or is not null is to identify values that don't have value. It doesn't necessarily mean 0. It just signifies that it does not have a value in your data. That wraps it up for the SQL Statement Foundation section. Thanks, and I will see you in the next section.